Hello everyone, welcome to my channel In Search of Wonder. My name is Anne and I am here today on a Thursday bringing you my weekly wrap-up Thursday because I find myself alone in my house. Unusually, all the boys in my house are at soccer and I thought I would film this while there's still some natural light, although as you can see the sun is in basically the exact wrong place and it's creating all of these shadows and everything. What happened to the golden hour, by the way? It's like 5:21. Isn't that the golden hour when the lighting is supposed to be perfect or whatever? I don't know. Whatever. Anyway, I just wanted to film the intro, so I had that ready I did different clips throughout the week as I read books, and so I will add those on to this video so you can see my initial thoughts after each book that I read. I realized after I had already read them and did my reviews on Goodreads and made my video clips of my little mini reviews that I read 2 books this week with the word heart in the title. So it was a very hearty week. And also I'm still working on Little Dorrit by Charles Dickens. I'll talk more about that in a separate clip, but I might be reading that one until December, but I'm enjoying it. I'll tell you more about that in a little while. And I don't know if I will get to anything else this week. If I do, I'll make another quick video about that and tack it on to the end here. So anyway, this is my weekly wrap up. What I read this week. Journeying from Scotland to America in the colonial times and the West Indies also in colonial times, circling around back to France, Marseille, and London, England, and who knows where else I'll get to between now and then. So enjoy the journey, and I will see you next time. Alright, so despite being out of the house yesterday, Saturday, from 7 o'clock in the morning until 9 o'clock at night, that was not intentional. I was planning on being home by mid-afternoon. I managed to read, thanks to my Kindle being with me. I managed to read quite a bit. So I finished A Heart Deceived by Michelle Greep. Sorry, I can't get it without a glare on it. So overall, quick response to the book, reaction to the book. It was a good book. I enjoyed it. Once I got about a third to halfway through the book, it really became like a page turner for me, and I wanted to finish the story. It got really involved in it, and I enjoyed it. So it's about this girl who is really at the mercy of her brother, who is the rector in a small parish in England, and unfortunately for her, he previously suffered from a brain fever, which is why they sent him to kind of recuperate in this village church. The church sent him there, took him from his previous position that had more responsibility, whatever, and sent him there. So she went with him because, you know, he was her provider, whatever. And unfortunately for her, she's in a very precarious position because the book honestly is not super clear if he... I'm assuming that he's suffering from madness or, you know, slowly going crazy, mental illness because of his brain fever. Or if he'd always kind of had that tendency. There's some implication that their father had some tendency towards mental illness as well. So possibly runs in the family. It wasn't 100% made clear. So anyway, bottom line, her brother is slowly going crazy. And that involves violent rages and abuse towards her. And that's her position that she's in. Not a good one. And then the hero of the story, Ethan Goodwin, he is like a good-for-nothing criminal at the beginning of this story. And he was friends with her younger brother. The heroine of the story, her name is Muriel, which I thought was a cool name. I'd never heard that name before. And I apologize. I feel like I'm like totally ruining the summary of this story hopefully you can follow me. So Ethan, the hero, Ethan Goodwin, he was friends with her younger brother, Will. And both of them had kind of run away from home, from their family situations, family dynamics, and were living a wild life in London, succumbing to criminal activities to support their drug and alcohol habits. You know, these are like low lives, right? Who came from privileged or semi-privileged backgrounds, but, you know, gave it all up for a life of debauchery. So, but he has a come to Jesus moment at the beginning of the book. In fact, it was kind of really cool. John Newton, author of Amazing Grace, is a character in this story who kind of serves as a mentor and spiritual guide to Ethan Goodwin, the hero of this story. So that was really cool. Fun to have that little historic element there. So he has a come to Jesus moment. He rejects his former lifestyle, and his friend Will dies, so he decides he needs to go and find Will's sister to take care of her, or, you know, make sure she's okay and tell her what happened to Will, etc. So he goes and he finds her, and long story short, you know, they end up falling in love, etc. At the end of the book, all ends well, it's a happy ever after, etc. There's other stuff that happens that I won't spoil, but I felt like some of the dialogue was more modern than the era that it was set in, which was very early Regency. I don't know if it's technically Regency, like late 1800s. And just some of the language just felt, some of the dialogue felt very modern to me, but I only noticed it in the beginning of the story. Once the story pulled me in and I was, you know, involved in it and wanting to find out what was happening, I didn't notice as much. It may have been there just the same. I just didn't realize, like I wasn't noticing it because I was too involved in the story. And I feel like the older brother's descent into full-fledged insanity, I don't know. I'm not sure how realistically drawn it was. I know that mental illness can have so many different faces to it, if you will. His seems to be largely centered on violent rages, some self-harm, but also like muttering nonsensical things, muttering rhymes, muttering in Latin, things that didn't make sense. So that's what it looked like for him. Just felt maybe, I don't know, fake or not quite realistic, but maybe it was because I just don't have a lot of experience with that. So I don't know. What I really liked about this story was it was very strong in faith elements. So that was good. Not even just in the, you know, straight up in the narration and in the conversations the characters have. There's discussion of faith and trust in God and working through their trust in God through the different circumstances that they go through. So that was good. But also in the story itself, it was very beautifully done. I won't spoil anything, but the two main characters, they both simultaneously go through this very heavy trial. That part of the book, about 60 to 80% of the way through the book, that portion is really, really dark and heavy. The whole book has a bit of a gothic feel to it to a certain extent, but that part really felt very heavy, where it just gets really hard to read, like hard things are happening. But then it's like they go through that. It's almost like a rebirth, like they have to die to live. They both suffered extremely dark, terrible things. Like they're going through hell basically, and they are having to die, to separate from everything that makes them who they are and strips everything from them. They emerge from the other side of that into life, but life even better than they had before. So I felt like there was it's kind of hard to explain without saying everything that happens, but I really liked how the author Michelle Greep did that. It is a wonderfully redemptive story arc where the story, not only are the characters experiencing the gospel and living in the gospel and you know, talking about it. I think that that's good and that's fine. I think that a book, though, can also be very Christian if the story is told in such a way that it draws that redemptive arc. And I feel like this does that as well. The story itself is very much about being stripped of yourself, dying to yourself, and trusting in God and accepting his work on your behalf. And then the reward of life on the other side of that. So it was very good, very well done. And at the end, I really enjoyed it overall. Probably 3.5 to 4 stars for me. So 3 means I like it. Probably won't read it again, but I really liked it. It was a good book. 4 means it edges above others of its class, so to speak. That's kind of how I look at it. So stands up a little bit above the rest of books along those lines, like Christian historical fiction rankings. So anyways, it was a good book. I enjoyed it. Glad I read it. And now I am working on A Bound Heart by Laura France, which I am enjoying as well. So I will see you next time. So this is a slightly different view. I'm here at work. I just finished this book on my lunch break, A Bound Heart by Laura France, and I am taking a little walk before I have to return to my duties. This is so beautiful where I'm walking. I'm going to show you. This is right near the school where I work, like this kind of preserved marshy area. Look how all the flowers are growing. Isn't that lovely? Absolutely beautiful. Just drinking in the beauty of it. So anyway, I finished that book just now and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoy Laura France's writing style, and I also love the time period in history she writes about. She very often writes, which I think every book I've read by her is written during a colonial American time period. So I really love it. And she digs out these little lesser known pieces of history about it, and always writes a beautiful story with characters that you really fall in love with. Anyway, love her books. So this was no exception. Wonderful book that I thoroughly enjoyed. It starts in Scotland, which is fun, on an island in Scotland, and the relationship is between a Scottish, English, British, not Scottish, laird, and another girl on the island whose family has fallen on, well, their family has fallen in status and wealth, etc. So she has a rich bloodline, but she is no longer wealthy or titled or anything like that. But the title of the story is A Bound Heart, and throughout almost the entire story, that's exactly what the situation is. For one reason or another, even though they have always, like, they were kind of like childhood sweethearts in a way, there's one thing or another that is keeping them from each other, binding their hearts, so to speak, from expressing their love for each other. So in the beginning, it's because the laird is actually married. His family forced him to marry for reasons of wealth and status, and so he has to guard his heart very carefully, even though he had long been in love with his childhood sweetheart. And then as time goes on, they are separated by geography and other things that happen.
And my one quibble about this book, the one thing I did not love, was that they are not united until the end of the story. But I guess that's the whole point of the title, right? The Bound Heart. So it makes sense. But it's just really well written. I enjoyed it. If you like historical fiction and historical romance like I do, where you're really immersed in the setting, and with, you know, just enough drama and tension to make an interesting story, beautifully told, then you will enjoy A Bound Heart by Laura France. So this time I'm showing you the garden while I talk, just so that you can see its beautifulness more than looking at me. So I just forgot to say, when I just did my review just now, I forgot to say something that really struck me about this novel, A Bound Heart, was the very strong sense of place. So the story begins in Scotland, on an island of Scotland, and kind of has that whole feel to it. You know, the remote place, the culture that's unique to a Scottish island, and the castle and castle ruins and the seashore and cliffs and all of that kind of stuff. It really evokes a whole mood there. And then they have to cross the Atlantic Ocean. Well, first they go to the mainland, and then that's a whole new feel, like the city, but still Scottish in nature, and still like different. Still has that same kind of Scottish vibe, of course, but just different from the remote island. And then they take a voyage across the Atlantic, and then so the ship that they're on is a whole different culture, and there's it's a whole different story too. It feels like there's a whole different cast of characters as they're crossing the Atlantic and going to the colonies. And then once they get to the colonies, they're separated, and Magnus, the laird, goes to the West Indies for a time, while Lark goes to Virginia. And again, the such a strong sense of place. You feel like you're really there in the West Indies, with the heat, and with the brilliant flowers, and with the slaves and their stories, and the sickness that happens there, like the yellow fever and that sort of thing. And then in Virginia, which was my favorite part, that area, the Tidewater area of Virginia, was just so wonderfully represented. A lot of Laura France's books are set, at least in part, in that area of Virginia, which is not exactly where I live, but I'm just a few hours away from that part of Virginia. And it's just so wonderfully well drawn. I love it. When she talks about Williamsburg, I've been to Williamsburg many times. I know when she talks about certain buildings or places there, I'm pretty sure the Ramsey family that the fictional Ramsey family in the story, pretty sure it's based on the actual Randolph family that lived in Williamsburg in the colonial times, based solely on the fact of the one house she describes. Sounds like the Randolph house, and family sounds kind of vaguely like the Randolph family, not biographically in any way, but just some aspects of it. Anyway, being a powerful family in Williamsburg at that time. Anyway, just a really strong sense of place in this story, even though like the places become as much a part of the story as the actual characters. Like the places, the settings become characters in the story in some ways, which was really cool. Really helps you to get kind of immersed and feel like you've been to Scotland and visited, and colonial Virginia and colonial West Indies. So I just wanted to mention that, and I hope that you enjoyed the views of this beautiful garden on my walk. So we are at the end of our first full 5-day week of school, the first of many. It went well, but it was long. Glad that we are done with it. And we wrapped everything up with a soccer game that did not go so well. So the less said about that, the better. Moving on. I don't have much planned for the rest of this weekend other than typical church activities and reading more Little Dorrit. That's the only thing I've got in process right now, so I wanted to make this quick video so I can finish a whole wrap-up video and have that posted this weekend. So I'm reading Little Dorrit by Charles Dickens. I guess I'm inadvertently getting a bit of a head start on Victober because I'm reading Dickens, and one of my next books that I plan to pick up is Fantasties by George MacDonald, also a Victorian author. But I did not do that intentionally. It just kind of worked out serendipitously. Kind of love it when that happens. So, yeah, I am about, I don't know, I guess 15% of the way through Little Dorrit, and I am remembering why I love Dickens so much. It's been a long time since I've read a Dickens, but loving it. I just enjoy his way with words. He has such a command of the English language, and he is a master of biting sarcasm and irony, making me laugh out loud sometimes. So one of the main themes in this story is imprisonment. You have one main character, Little Dorrit. She is raised in a debtor's prison and grows to adulthood. She's not there because of her own debt, but she's raised there because she was born there. And she, as an adult, is working outside the debtor's prison, but that's where she sleeps at night to take care of her dad, who's still there in the prison. So she's raised in one kind of prison, and then another character who is becoming an important part of the story is Mr. Arthur Clenham. He was also raised, but in a different kind of prison. He was raised in a home where the mother ruled with an iron fist and gave lip service to Christianity, but her own idea of Christianity, and obviously wanted to be thought of as a righteous, upstanding person, but she wasn't actually, which you can tell by everything she says and does. She's cold-hearted and vicious and cruel and probably a criminal. I don't really know. I'm kind of guessing at this point. And her son was raised in that environment. There are a lot of allusions to imprisonment in the descriptions of things that happen. One passage just made me wow. I actually wrote wow in my annotations. Very profound, I know. But so he is telling his mom, he's a grown man and he's 40 years old. He finally has the guts to tell her, listen, I am not carrying on the family business. You manage it yourself anyway. You do it the way you want. So you don't need me. I am stepping out on my own. And so then Dickens goes on to describe his mother's response to this. And he says, "Woe to the suppliant, if such a one there were or ever had been, who had any concession to look for in the inexorable face at the cabinet." So that's, his mother was sitting at the cabinet, her, like a secretary kind of desk where they're having this conversation. So he had, woe to the suppliant, if such a one there were or ever had been, who had any concession to look for in the inexorable face at the cabinet. Woe to the defaulter, whose appeal lay to the tribunal where those severe eyes presided. Great need had the rigid woman of her mystical religion, veiled in gloom and darkness, with lightnings of cursings, vengeance, and destruction flashing through the sable clouds. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors, was a prayer too poor in spirit for her. Smite thou my debtors, Lord, wither them, crush them. Do thou as I would do, and thou shalt have my worship. This was the impious tower of stone she built up to scale heaven. Whoa, what an indictment. This reminds me of some of the things that Jesus spoke to the Pharisees about being whitewashed sepulchres and yeah. Smite thou my debtors, Lord, wither them, crush them, do thou as I would do, and thou shalt have my worship. But isn't it so easy to fall into that trap as a human and even as a believer? Pride being our downfall, and thinking that things should go the way we think they should go, instead of letting God be God and rule in his own way, with his own timing, in his justice and in his mercy and his grace and forgiveness. Yeah, that was a very impactful passage for me. I found it very eloquently said. Then here's another one that gives you a glimpse into her Christianity. I hesitate to call it Christianity, and yet, there are many Christians like her, and only God knows the actual condition of their heart. And also, there but by the grace of God go I. All of us can have this tendency to be pharisaical, to be like her. Here's another paragraph that talks about her approach to religion. Thus was she always balancing her bargains with the majesty of heaven, posting up the entries to her credit, strictly keeping her set off and claiming her due. She was only remarkable in this for the force and emphasis with which she did it. Thousands upon thousands do it, according to their varying manner, every day. And don't we all? I wrote in the margins, trying to be her own savior, but instead imprisoning herself. It's a good word, guys. It's a good word. Thank you, Dickens, for bringing that to us. So I am enjoying this. I am savoring every well-written word. Sorry, guys, this is so disjointed. Brain shot. But I wanted to do like a mid-month kind of like check-in status, whatever, because I had such an ambitious TBR for the month of September. And so I double-checked my list of what I wanted to read in September, and was surprised to discover that out of the 11-ish books that I had put on my TBR, I've actually read 6 of them. I mean, Little Dorrit is huge. It's 800 some pages, so that's worth like 2 books right there. But I'm more than halfway through, and we're exactly halfway through the month. So that's pretty good progress. I'm actually hopeful I'll get through all of them, because at least, well, one of them is a short read. Fantastis is short. And Autumn by the Sea is an easy read. And I'm kind of saving that for actual autumn, like the equinox, you know, when it's really fall, because I'm weird like that. Technically, it's still summer right now, so yeah. Anyways, that is the status. And now, I'm going to close out this video. I think I need to go drink some coffee, and yeah, I need to read Little Dorrit some more. So, happy reading, happy coffee drinking. See y'all next time.